As we get started here, our Scaling Up team has initiated a mini webinar series focused on tools for working beyond boundaries. In the past couple of months, we've hosted webinars focused on NPscape as well as landscape level mitigation. And the real intention here is to provide some of the tools that allow parks to work beyond the boundaries in a more meaningful way, and to kind of hone in on some of those specific tools. All of the webinars to date have, or we've captured the presentations, and we feature them on our internal Scaling Up toolkit. If you don't have access to the NPS server, we can make those PowerPoints and recordings. Please just reach out, and we'll be happy to share those with you as well. We also feature a lot of our webinars on the Practitioners Network for Large Landscape Conservation site, which is just largelandscape.org. So if you're interested in following along with the mini webinar series on an external site that all of our partners have access to, you can find it there as well. With that said, today's webinar features our authorities that allow us to work beyond park boundaries. And our guest speaker is Marcia from our National Office of Policy in Washington, D.C. And she'll be sharing a general overview of the authorities that allow us to and at later dates, we expect to kind of hone in on some of those very specific authorities and share with you some additional information about how we can use those to work across park boundaries. So, without further ado, again, this session will be recorded. Yep. Again, this session will be recorded, so we will have that available for everyone following the presentation today. Okay, so Marcia, do you want to go ahead and get started with your presentation? Marcia, are you there?
Is she on mute?
She doesn't seem to be on mute. Let's see. Marcia, are you there? Okay, well, while we wait for Marcia, I'll just do a sort of a quick overview of what we have on our toolkit. Marcia, if you end up hearing, or if you end up being able to hear us and talk, feel free to just chime right in. So just real quick, our Scaling Up team has been, over the last several months, developing a pretty extensive toolkit for park employees to have the most access to some of the existing tools, everything from authorities like we'll talk about today, but then also some of the mapping tools that we have internally, as well as some of the tools that our partners provide on. So the page that you should all be seeing right now is our and we have again kind of an extensive list of all the authorities that allow us to work beyond boundaries. You can see here we start off with our basic NPS management policies from 2006, highlight some of the key ones that either park initiatives have been using successfully or things that are built to support large landscape conservation. In addition to that, we've also plugged in a handful of the executive authorities that allow us to work beyond boundaries, and tried to put together a list of a variety of different types of authorities. So whether it's an executive encourages partnerships, collaboration.
Cass, I'm here, and people are having some troubles with the audio, and I had to call back in. I'm so sorry that you had to dive in there. But if you want to keep going, go ahead.
Okay, I'll just finish this little piece, Marcia, and then turn it right over to you.
Thank you.
So you can see here the executive authorities that we've pulled together, and by no means is this list exhausted, but it's our initial start of some of the key authorities. And again, things like the Executive Order 13.3 to things like the Service First Authority or for Service First agreements that will transfer funds across agencies. In addition to that, we've also provided a list of key documents that Park World Partners may find useful. But Marcia, let's go ahead and turn to your presentation, and we can go from there.
Thanks so much.
Just taking 1 second to pull it up on the screen.
Great. We're so sorry for the audio trouble, and I hope that folks can hear okay. And maybe you could just signal to Cass if you're still having problems so we'll know. The overview of the authority section on the policy, the toolkit is very helpful, and you'll find listings that will perhaps you'll find some nuggets there to apply to your situation. What I'm doing from the Office of Policy is to try to help you get a little context, and of course we have the PowerPoint up now, if you can see that. And we'll go to the next slide, which is kind of the action slide. It's the policy gladiator. And as you all know, we are the executive branch. And this is intended to be, one of those action types of visions of ourselves. If we are using these authorities, say that you want to look at all of those scaling up tools that are in law and policy, we see ourselves very actively engaged in employing these policies for the benefit of others. So for the question of where we're grounded, we get our authority from the Constitution. We must stay grounded in our authorities and mission. And you'll see the management policies as the sword in the gladiator. And by the way, the gladiator can be male or female. We know this is well documented in history that there were male and female warriors in time. And our policy warrior stance is to make good, sound decisions, and we use our mission as our shield. We want to be cross-divisional and involve people. That means that other agencies and other organizations also have their policies and authorities. And by creating good partnerships or liaisons, we can actually increase our capabilities by leveraging our authorities. So the next slide. Today we really wanted to kind of emphasize all of those things on the toolkit have a hierarchy of authority. And the focus, it starts right off with management policies, which was that sword of the gladiator there. The directive system is really key to managing our parks and beyond the park boundary that is mentioned numerous times in there. For the new policies that are coming up, we'll give you a glimpse of those, and then maybe end on some questions on how we might strategically use our legal authorities to accomplish large landscape conservation. Next one. The primary laws, this is just a primer. You'll find this probably in the list, but you'll see that the Organic Act is an incredibly important anchor to our mission, and it has been reaffirmed on how we interpret these to encompass our large landscape conservation work. It's very important to stay grounded in these very key laws. Next slide. Okay, of course 16 U.S.C. has changed, and we are citing here the 54 U.S.C. General Authorities Act. Thank goodness we can still refer to some of these. And it does have relevance today, just in case anyone felt that a law from 1916 was no longer relevant. In 1978, Congress reaffirmed its expectation that our first priority is protecting the parks. Next slide. some of the laws that authorize the Park Service to do more than just manage the parks. These are also found in your Scaling Up Authorities tab. Land and Water Conservation Fund, you'll see many things that you're familiar with. It's good to know things that you're not familiar with. We also have these listed in Part 2 of the management policies, and I have a URL to find all of the partnership programs for the Park Service. So we're already going beyond park boundaries in many aspects of the work in the Park Service. All right, so just going over the next slide in MPS policymaking, we interpret the laws that Congress has given us. Congress makes a lot of policy for the Park Service. We often, to fine-tune what we're doing in our interpretation, we need to examine legislative history so that we are consistent with legislative intent, where that may be a little murky. And some of our policy decisions go into regulations, which we won't go into. Let's go to the next slide. So why do we have these service-wide policies? This is important for landscape. This is what we represent, and I'll go to number 3, is to represent our pact or contract with the American people. It helps us say no to unreasonable demands, and to assert our authority to interpret the law, and also to protect us in legal challenges. The policy gladiator must always be prepared to defend and to make sure that our decisions are documented in the administrative record. So the next one, quick review of the policy pyramid, which I mentioned. Everything flows from the U.S. Constitution. You have the public laws, and in most cases, co-equal with laws are treaties. And there are different kinds of treaties. And then you have on down executive orders. These are mentioned as they are relevant in the authorities tab. Regulations, departmental policies. We have numerous departmental policies. And then we are really focusing here today a lot on the NPS policies, which is in our purview to promulgate. And we also have level 3 to the management policies, which is the director's orders. We have numerous examples of beyond park boundaries and director's orders. This little slide on just reviewing what policy is, and that it is service-wide and articulated by the director. I'm reading kind of low down in that paragraph. And we must follow these policies unless they are specifically waived or modified in writing by the secretary, the assistant secretary, or the director. So the director signs off on our policies. And we really need to know how to view this at our bureau level. Next slide. So that directive system again, level 1, management policies. Again, we use that to illustrate the policy gladiator. This helps to slice through fuzziness and clarity and some challenges at times to make sure that we're grounded in our mission. Level 2, director's orders and policy memorandum. Memoranda and director's orders are the level 2 for the directive system. And we can tier off of management policies, and they are much shorter in terms of really interpreting everything that pertains to a particular topic. We are seeing some new ones that I have a list, and we'll point those out very soon. Level 3 are the handbooks and reference manuals, which could give a great deal of information on how to actually employ these policies for the frontline practitioner. So that's just a refresher on how we organize our policies. Other bureaus and federal agencies have their own systems, and it is important to understand that they also have their own highest level management expectations for such endeavors as large landscape conservation. And it's good to know about those as well as ours in the National Park Service. Okay. Now, the role of a director's order. A director's order could be something like Director's Order 25, land protection. The key part of that is simply paragraph 3 in DO 25 land protection for the Park Service, where it recognizes the need to work beyond park boundaries very clearly there, because ecosystems are never just exactly in the footprint of a park. So the role of the director's order, we have something here on that, and I covered it already, so let's go to the next slide. Accessing the directive system, we have our own website in the Office of Policy. Other offices, let's say that we have something listed on the Authorities tab. If another office is responsible for that, they may actually have additional guidance. In the Office of Policy, we have a lot of things there that are cross-referenced as a library. It is a whole reference library of policy. We have a drop-down menu. We link to things like the Code of Federal Regulations and to key legislation and executive orders. So that's our screenshot as it looks today. And the little select a policy topic, a policy subject, you can find numerous things there, just to make sure you also know how to use another policy tool. The most important concepts in Management Policies 2006, and that is, the question of how do we interpret impairment, and there is a prohibition on impairment. How our commitment is articulated to resource protection, the concept of appropriate use, unacceptable impacts, and enjoyment, and where there is a conflict, conservation will predominate over enjoyment. This was a huge epic battle to get to this point of our interpretation, which we're very glad to have this. So just a little bit more on impairment, and that is something that depends a great deal on professional judgment of responsible MPS managers. And so that is actually a term of art that is now in the glossary for our management policies, is the term of professional judgment. I think this will come into play for large landscape scale conservation. The question here of 143 in management policies is, let's see here, it's very important to realize that when we were preparing the 2001 edition, this was not here. So we've articulated the whole question of unacceptable impacts, and policy does evolve, and we may see yet more of this in future editions. So what this means is that each time we undertake a project or make a decision, we have to evaluate whether it will cause impairment or unacceptable impacts. And so impairment has its own website, of course, and you could go there for more information. And I think this really does have some key concepts that will be important for how we employ policy in the service of large landscape scale conservation. Now, we come to this question about being aware when we use policy of negative perceptions about how the Park Service interprets from the law, and some of these are right here. There are 4 of them. That there is a perception sometimes that the parks lock up the parks, de facto wilderness, or that MPS field staff do not like visitors, or that they see every impact as being an impairment and a reason to say no, and that the no impairment policy is our convenient excuse to justify 1 through 3 above. Knowing this in advance, because this plays out with Congress, these are important to address. So how do we sort through all this? We want to use our planning processes. We want to look at different parks' purposes. This is all, by the way, in the policy or the toolkit for all of landscape scale. If you look under there, it really depends on your resources that you're looking at. But you take into account the specific legislation and any controlling executive orders or regs, and look at alternatives, apply the policies, and then leverage our authorities and capabilities with other organizations and agencies through agreements. That's, some of them are not formal agreements, perhaps, but okay, what are our challenges is that realizing that having the right thing to do on our side is not always enough. and we need to think ahead to what might go wrong when we apply policy. Develop that game plan with strategy and tactics. Organize the facts, the policies that we are putting into play, and the talking points, and being proactive, inclusive, reaching out, listening. Make sure that we're mentioning these in our case studies, making these policies and authorities that are underpinning our actions and decisions, making them more visible. That's how we could address how people might be educated about policy, and definitely leverage the authorities of others. So I think that's all I have for that. And I think we could open up for questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Marcia. Yeah, if folks would like to unmute their phone and ask any questions, whether it's pertaining to the sort of the general overview of authorities to allow us to work beyond boundaries, or specific authority that perhaps you're dealing with in your park or your program, that you might like to take this chance to ask someone in the policy office for more information about. Okay, hearing none. The tools team, again, we will have this PowerPoint presentation available for folks on our Scaling Up Toolkit, and we'll also make it available on the practitioner's site, as well as the recording. If you do have any questions regarding, certainly check out the website that Marcia had mentioned, and we'll go ahead and put that in the chat as well, so that people can have access to that. It's kind of surprising that there aren't too many questions, just because we, as a Scaling Up team, we often get questions from parks, whether it's about sharing funding across boundaries via another agency or perhaps another partner, or perhaps international issues and working across large lands that cross, not only national lands but also international land. So again, one last call for questions, and if we have none, we'll go ahead and wrap it up.
And Cass, this is Marcia. If anybody has specific questions or just something they want to lob my way, they can easily email me, and we do enjoy that, to have any questions or feedback on policy.
Great. Huge thanks to Marcia and the policy office for your presentation today, and thanks everyone for joining us. Please stay tuned for our webinar in our series. We'll be featuring the Nature Conservancy in June, and then in July we'll be featuring one on NP species. So thanks again for joining us. Watch for the recording and the presentation on our Scaling Up Toolkit.
Thanks, Marcia.
You're welcome.